Sven. All right, I'm talking to Nancy Bamaga here, and you've had a big week. How you feeling? You look exhausted.
Well, I am exhausted. My day, first leg of travel was stopping at Supply Nation Conference Connect 2017. I had a trade booth at at Connect 2017 in Sydney, and that evening then I flew down here. And then was at straight into the National Indigenous Dance Forum, and then of course the Cultural Summit. Mm-hmm.
Busy, but what a day it's been. But one of your main, I guess, interests or drives is to make people aware about fake in Aboriginal Indigenous art, and particularly coming into the Commonwealth Games. How can we all play a role in making this a very important issue?
Well, there's a few ways you can support our artists, our producers of authentic arts. There's when you're going to the retail shops, whether they be in the mall somewhere, within the Indigenous retail sector, tourism sector, is to ask that question: is this authentic artwork? And there's a few ways of identifying authentic artwork. You will find that there are logos of particular retailers where they'll have information of the artist, and you can to go with that product, whether it be a merchandise or whether it's artwork. And some of the artworks they've already established through Indigenous Art Code galleries that have ethical practices, and where you find the information to go with that particular artwork of the artist. And then, but the same thing applies to products within the retail tourism sector. And if you're looking for authentic art, that's where, unfortunately, there's a lot of estimated 80% of fake art.
And that's an incredible number. So you're saying 80% of art in tourist centres is fake?
Within the Indigenous retail tourism sector. And that's stuff that are made other than by Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander artists, unless there's kind of like partnerships formed through the distributors of those particular products.
So that's an enormous basic theft of wealth.
Yes.
And from what I was hearing, a lot of what you're focused on is like enterprise for your community to build their own wealth. So for you, this must be really frustrating and the biggest such important thing to sort out.
Well, that's right. The first thing that impacted on our industry was when the GST came in. A lot of found it too hard to do whatever they were producing at that time, whether it was clothing and designs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander images on clothing, with the clothing lines. So some of these businesses quickly shut down after that because they found it too hard. And now the only thing that's existing is people that are kind of like coming from a business sector where they're more aware of, in terms of trading, when you're looking at things like distribution, of looking at income generation, how you can slice up your market and identify where the product's going to go to, and then looking at the distribution, the back end of it, whether it's here or it's going overseas. Rather than fake art coming in here, we need to turn it around. It actually goes external from here.
Right. So exporting Aboriginal art, and the money comes back to the community.
The community. And there's already been a lot of organisations that have been set up in partnerships internationally as well around creation of wealth, where there's win-win situation for, say, it might be community in India working with our artists here around developing and producing a particular piece of product, and then our artist gets royalty. So artists need to be understanding what's a royalty, what's a consignment of artwork.
How valuable the IP is around the art as well.
Yeah. So the whole thing about intellectual property and how you can, once you were quite aware of how that works, and then being able to, become a bit more business savvy around not only protecting your intellectual property, but how you yourself can create wealth.
Yeah. And just now, coming into the conversations we've been hearing this afternoon, for you, why is it so valuable that the First Nations people are at front and centre of where we're headed towards into the future around our Australian culture?
Well, it's our culture, our business. Simple as that. People must remember that. And that was one of the reports that Terry Jenke had put out back in the day. Our culture, our future. If we're going to be about self-determination, being self-sufficient, and being able to, um, be in charge of our own future, we need to take control of it for our future generation, because it is about legacy. Because we don't want to be in some sections in remote or rural communities where we're living in poverty. We want to drive that agenda ourselves and look at how we can be wealthy from our culture, from our business. Yeah.
And from your history and
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
and if you could imagine what the future could look like in 2030, what would you see if you could just briefly describe your dream?
I would see our people are no longer under the shadow of past historical policies of segregation, assimilation, and I kind of like think sometimes, question the fact: are we still living under those same policies? But it's called something else now.
Yes.
So
And it's in a more subtle sort of
yeah, yeah, and
cultural, economic way.
yeah. So how can we do it? But I think it's about education is number one, and I always when I'm talking to my children and grandchildren, to pursue education. But one day we still all have a dream as a grandparent, as a great grandmother, that one day you're going to be the astronaut, you're going to be blah blah blah, whatever that is that you need to be, in that particular at that particular time and age, in another 20 odd years or so, so we, even though our culture does evolve and adapt, and that's one amazing thing about it. Yeah.
But you're feeling hopeful?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of young art workers that are coming through our industry, young people that have got their own businesses in this age of innovation and technology. There are, so particularly if you live in the city, because you've got to look at what sort of business, where the gaps are in the industry, and as a business person, then build on that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nancy.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Thank you.